Hello, everyone. This is Emily Hamblin, and I am so excited for today's guest, Dr. Samantha Goldman. She is an OT, and if you have followed me long enough, you know that I love OTs and I love the help that they've given my children. And I'm just so excited to jump in today and talk about meal times that might be a little bit more difficult for you and for your family, and get all of her awesome wisdom to help us out today. So, Samantha, can you please introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Sam, and my background is as a pediatric occupational and feeding therapist. I've been an OT for about 10 years now, both in the hospital system, working inpatient with kids, and in the outpatient system. And in my own personal business, I love to teach parents all about the sensory system and how it affects us not only at the table, but throughout our entire day.
Oh, that is so good. Let's just jump in then. What are some challenges that you have heard families um, face when they're talking about difficulties at mealtime? I know in my family we have a lot, and I know clients have come to me with a lot of challenges, but I'd love to just hear your answer. What are some challenges that families might face when it comes to meal times?
Oh my gosh, I would say the biggest one when a parent comes to me, the biggest reason that they come is because of the mealtime battle. They are
Mm.
frustrated, they are exhausted, and because they're worried. So they're worried about the fact that they're constantly fighting with their child at the table, but they're not getting the nutrition that they feel like they need. And that worry and that all-consuming, feeling, and also parental guilt, like it feels like your job to feed your child,
Yeah.
but when your child doesn't want to eat, it makes it really challenging. So that's usually what I would say when they come in. That is the biggest thing that parents tell me is one, I am exhausted of fighting with them. And two, I'm worried about their nutrition.
Mm. So let's delve into a little bit of this idea of picky eaters. And I always have to put picky in quotes. People that have heard me talk about this before, they know why. I still honestly, like last night, I still had the thought pop into my head, like, oh, stop being so picky, is what I thought for one of my kids that was not wanting to eat. I think we had tacos and there was lettuce in the tacos, and he didn't want the lettuce in the tacos. He wanted it on the side and in a salad and with salad dressing. And I still have these thoughts coming to my mind of like, oh, just stop being so picky. No, I didn't say it out loud, and I've learned to control them, but they are still there. um, Talk to us a little bit about like, what does it mean to be a picky eater? Why are some kids so picky?
Well, number one, like claps to you for not saying it out loud because it takes a lot of regulation and control on your end to do
Mm.
that. So that is amazing. And I know that is what you teach and preach. So I'm excited for everybody to take that from here and apply it. But when it comes to picky, I also love that you do put it in quotations because anybody who's followed me for a while, anybody who knows me, and now those of you who are new to me will learn I actually do not like the word picky at all. However, it is the big term that we use to describe. It's kind of what we hear. We hear a parent come in and they're like, my child is picky, or you hear somebody else say, oh, they're so picky. But when it comes to eating, there's usually a reason that somebody isn't eating. There's something going on in their body, in their brain, in their mind that's telling them, like, I don't want to eat that. And there's usually a reason behind it. And so I'm more concerned about what the reason is behind it than what we're
Mm.
calling it. But I do have to say there are terms that are used in the industry, in the feeding industry, and one of them is picky.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't
it
actually know
is,
that.
yeah. Yes. So I believe, I'm not sure exactly. I believe it is Dr. K. Toomey from the SOS approach to feeding who came up with the different categories. But when it comes to feeding, we actually divide feeding challenges into two different categories. So picky eating and then problem feeding, and they're different. And
Mm.
so that's a lot like something that doesn't really get seen that much. Problem feeding is kind of that step up. That's when we're eating less than 10 foods. It's when we're avoiding an entire food category. It's when mealtimes are that constant battle. Whereas a picky eater is more considered a child who is eating between, 20 to 30 different foods. Maybe they only eat one from each category. Maybe they are very stringent about what they eat, but when we introduce a new food, it doesn't lead to that total meltdown. So
Mm.
it is different. And in the industry, we do actually use picky as a specific category with qualifying features.
Well, that is fascinating. So I'm going to bring up some examples. I have one child that now I didn't know for many, many years this child actually has autism. And now it makes a lot of sense. But for the years that I didn't know it, his autism is very much not noticeable until you start to put all the pieces together in this particular child. But I remember like we would be eating grapes, and if a grape was like a funny shape, he wouldn't eat it. And I just remember this was years ago. This one moment, I got so frustrated with him. I was like, just put it in your mouth. Like, come on, what are you doing? It's going to taste the same as all the other grapes. And I'm pretty sure I said that exact same thing, just like that to him. And the more pressure I put on him to put that grape in his mouth, the more like clamped down he became. And at the time, I thought, this child is just being stubborn. This child just doesn't want to do it. And even went into, I know we're going to talk about this when you have me on your podcast, a little bit of that like knee-jerk reaction. I'm the parent. I said so. You need to do what I'm telling you. I definitely had all of those like subconscious, right? Thoughts just kind of flood to try to get him to just put that grape in his mouth and he would see it taste the same as all the other grapes and it's just fine. But the more I pushed, the worse it got. Can you now? I explained it from the perspective I used to have. I'm sure a lot of parents can relate, but let's unpack like what was really going on for that child and why was it that the more I pushed, the harder it became for him?
Yeah. So, kind of like I said, there's usually something going on. There is a reason, and we forget that. So, we as adults, we're like, I know what this grape is. I know exactly what it's going to taste like. I can predict what it's going to feel like. I know exactly what this is going to be, and I know it's going to be pleasurable for me. But for a child who's having a hard time eating, they're not seeing that same picture that we are.
Mm.
So, it could be a whole bunch of different things. And so I do like to kind of start with that. There are different things that lead to feeding challenges, whether it be the sensory system, which we are going to delve really into at the end of this answer, oral motor skills. So if the muscles in their mouth don't move and work and their jaw isn't coordinating the right way, we tend to avoid certain types of foods. There are other over 400 medical diagnoses that lead to eating challenges, GI issues, allergies. So there could be an array of reasons for why a child looks at a food and is like, I don't want to eat that. And we don't know that yet, right? We really have to delve in and it's like peeling an onion away, really. You peel the layers away until you get to what is that reason. Now, when we're talking specifically about the look of a food and it being different than all the other grapes, I'm starting to wonder about sensory. So I'm starting to wonder about that visual system. So when it comes to the look of a food, we're usually talking about our visual sense. So our sense of seeing. Now, of course, we know he can probably see the grape, right? But it looks different. And so something about where the brain is taking in that information and processing it, it's not recognizing that that grape is the same as the other grapes.
Mm.
Now, what most people don't realize is our sensory system's primary job in life is to protect us. So when a spider crawls up our leg, our senses feel the spider and it goes, oh my gosh, and we shake it off. We hear horn honking and we turn to make sure we're not in danger. That is its very, very first job. So if our senses are sending a signal that, hey, this isn't going to feel good. Something's wrong. I don't recognize this. I don't know if it's safe. And then our parents come and they're like, take a bite, take a bite, take a bite. Our senses are going to jump into overdrive to protect us. They're like, no, this is not safe. Red flags. And it kind of gets bigger and bigger. So what's usually more effective, on the other hand, is bringing it down and helping them realize that it's safe, helping them understand that this is safe, and helping their senses process it in a way that feels good, process it in a way that feels good for their body.
So good. So instead of this like seeing it as stubbornness, if I see it maybe as maybe some anxiety or some hesitation or some fear, even if it's showing up as, it looks like something else. I think that can maybe help us as parents to realize like, oh, he's real. His brain's telling him that this grape might not be safe. And the more that I become fiery myself, the more likely he's going to associate not safe with that grape.
Yeah. And what I really like to tell parents too is that kids, they want to make us happy. Really, kids have this intrinsic desire to make us happy. And that's been actually shown in research. So typically, if they could just eat that grape and just get over it so that they could enjoy the meal with you and make you happy, the majority of the time they will. We forget that. We don't see that. Kids, especially kids with sensory processing challenges, often get labeled as stubborn, strong willed, difficult, hard. But when it comes to the sensory system, and I'm not saying all the time that this is what's going on, but when it comes to the sensory system, they're struggling. And so I really like to remind parents that this is a struggle for them. They are trying, this is hard. And so I actually think of feeding as a relationship, and the relationship comes first. You have to trust them that they're going to eat, and they have to trust you that you're not going to force them to do something that doesn't feel good. And when we actually take a couple steps back and work on that as a relationship, so it's not you against them at the table, it's you and them against this struggle that they're having, against this challenging food. When parents really embrace that, it's really cool to see the relationship develop at the table and the improvements that happen with eating.
Oh, that's so good. And that was something that had been a mindset shift for me years ago with like non-food problems that I was having with my children. Instead of like, my child doesn't want to leave to get to school and it's me against my child. I want to leave to get to school. You don't. It's me and my child with this problem. Oh, we have to go to school. Oh man, that's really hard. You don't want to stop playing with your truck right now. I get it. And how can I support you through this difficult time? Like it was a game changer in our parenting relationship. And the same can be for food when children are hesitant about eating or, whatever food battle we might have. I just love that shift of instead of it's, I want you to eat this food and you don't want to eat the food and now we're on opposite teams. I can come over here to my kids' team and, okay, you don't want to eat this food. And we want you to expand your nutrition intake or whatever our goal is. I'm on your team. And how can we get through this together? I just love that shift.
Yeah. And what a honestly breath of relief for a parent to have to not think, I have to get them to do this. I need them to get them to do this. To, okay, let's work together. How do we do this together? It is really like a big, sigh of relief off of your back to not have all of that only on you and be a team with them.
Yes, so good. Oh, I could keep going, I think, for hours on this and the thoughts that are in our head on like good parents get their children to eat like this and being able to erase those and replace them with much more helpful thoughts. This is so good. Okay, so there's another, I'm sure it's related to sensory and more, but I'm going to shift into another difficulty that we've been having in our family, and that is staying at the table during meal times. And I've tried a lot of different things. I'll get to like what's landed and what's working the best right now, but I'm still open for more advice because it's just still kind of a band-aid. We've tried letting the kids walk while they eat, and that's a bit of a disaster because they'll like walk over to the couch and wipe their food on the couch and then like pick up a book and set the pizza down on the stack of book, like whatever it is that they're eating. And it's just that was like a day that we tried that and we quickly saw that that won't work. So having kids at the table during a mealtime who, we have a lot of ADHD in our family, we have autism, we have 3 boys and a toddler. So just getting everyone to stay at the table during that mealtime is a challenge for us. What tips do you have for us?
Yeah. So when a child has a hard time sitting at the table, my mind goes in two separate ways. The first one is there a lot of pressure at the table? Is the table not a pleasurable place? And are they trying to escape it? So that's kind of that one side. It sounds like you guys have totally veered away from that already. But for a parent who's trying to wonder and just starting with, okay, I put food on the table and they are out of here. My first question for those parents is, what is happening at the table? Do they even want to be at that table? Because if not, if their fight or flight response is going in, you're seeing flight. They are running. On the other hand, what I'm also thinking about is the sensory system. So something a lot of people don't know, because we don't really talk about it unless you have met an OT, is that we have 3 other senses that nobody talks about. One of them is called the vestibular sense. That is our sense of head movement. Now, some kids, especially, it is, I would say, I don't want to say more likely, but it happens quite often in kids with ADHD and kids with autism. Their body looks for more of this information. They need more movement to keep their body regulated. And so a lot of the times we'll see them constantly shifting in their chair, bouncing up and down, running back and forth. When we move our head, the vestibular system is actually activated from our inner ear. So we have crystals and fluid in our inner ear. And when we move our head, the crystals move and the fluid moves. So when we're running, our vestibular system is activated. When we're jumping, our vestibular system is activated. When we're turning and spinning, we're walking around the house with that pizza, their vestibular system's getting activated. So those are kind of my 2 thoughts is this a child who, one, is escaping the table? Or is this a child who needs a little bit more movement? And how do we allow that movement at the table or before the table to get their body to that just right spot that they can feel organized and concentrate? So something I love to do is incorporating movement and heavy work. When we talk about heavy work, we talk about kind of like pushing and pulling activities, jumping activities before getting to the table. So giving their body the input it's looking for, so that when they get to the table, it's feeling a little bit more calm and organized. So riding bikes, jumping on trampolines, pulling, I love laundry bins, pulling and pushing laundry bins, like for fun obstacle courses. I'm an obstacle course like fanatic. I will make an obstacle course out of anything. And then at the table, we also maybe want to consider alternative kinds of seating. So there are things like wiggle seats, which usually my kids in therapy adore. It is like, it's a cushion that kind of looks, they all think it's a whoopee cushion at first, but it's not. It's kind of like blown up, and it just lets them move their body, move their head without getting out of their chair. So they're getting the movement they need. And then they can also focus on eating. Things like the therapy ball chairs, different kinds of stools. So thinking about what can still give them that movement, but also have them focus on eating.
Oh, those are so good. Yeah, that's the tool I'm actually borrowing it right now. If you're watching the video, you can see
Ah,
I'm on the yoga ball, a therapy ball, I think you called it. It's a little, and it
yeah.
also has a swivel. So one of my kids now, when he eats, he'll do swivel back and forth the whole time, and he will stay at the table for the first time. So
Isn't it amazing when you find the
yes.
right strategy?
And my mindset helped too. I don't think 7 years ago I would have been like, no, you need to just sit at the table. You can't be swiveling the whole time you're eating. And to realize, like, well, why not? Like, why not walk around? We tried that, and there's a lot of why nots. They couldn't walk around while eating, but why can't he swivel? Is he going to knock other people's food? Can we just move their food away so he can meet that need? But yeah, this idea of, do they even want to be at the table? That is something I think I can work on, because right before dinner, that hour before dinner is the hardest hour of our day. My kids are hungry. I'm trying to get the food on the table, and there's often a lot of sibling conflict. So I think making that transition to the table more pleasant than come to the table, everyone, it's time for dinner, which is when I'm super tired and at the end of my rope, where I tend to go. If I can plan a little bit in advance, okay, how are we going to get them to the table in a really fun and enjoyable way, so it's a place they want to be? That's my next challenge I'm giving myself now.
And as an OT, I mean, we love like animal walks. That's like one of our fun ways to do it in the clinics. We'll like wash our hands, and then we go to the table. We're like, okay, today we're going to be a bear. Can everybody walk like a bear? Well, we're going to do that to the sink because our hands are going to get dirty. But can we jump like a frog? Can we jump like a bunny? And you're getting that heavy work and that movement in on the way in a fun way.
My boys are hyper focused on Pokemon, so it might be, what Pokemon should we be on our way to the table?
Yes. Use those interests as much as you can.
Oh, so good. This is great. All right. Well, thank you for that. Um, so we've talked a bit about sensory, and you said there's those three hidden sensories. Are there other sensory, like, let me think how I want to ask this. Are there other behaviors that can manifest as what we might think are misbehaviors at the table that really are a child having unmet sensory needs?
Oh my gosh, so many. I could probably go on and on about this forever, but I'll pick the most common ones. So definitely getting dirty is a big thing. So you'll see kids kind of not want to pick up their utensils, not want to pick up their food, pulling their hands away. These hands to me are always like when they come up, you're like, oh wait, I want to dig into that. There's something sensory that might be going on. Textures. Any child who's very texture specific, again, this is related to touch. This is related to our touch sense. We don't think about it, but we have the same touch receptors in our mouth that we do in our hands. And so usually when a child has a hard time touching something, they also have a hard time eating it because the texture doesn't feel good to the same touch receptors.
Could it be sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
Some kids I've noticed, whether my own kids or kids I've worked with, they struggle more to want to use utensils. They really want to eat with their fingers. Is that also probably a sensory need going on there?
It can be strength, it can be sensory. So there's another, again, I always say all these things we don't talk about. I wish we talked about more, but we have a third part of sensory processing. So when we talk about sensory processing in general, we're thinking about three steps. Number one, we get the sensory information. Number two, we process it in our head and we interpret it. And number three, we respond to it. Kids who have a hard time with that third step of sensory processing can have motor planning difficulties. So, difficulty planning out how to pick up their utensils, how to hold it, what to do with their hands, or postural difficulties, difficulty sitting up at the table with strength, using their hands efficiently because their core isn't working efficiently. So, yes, definitely not being able to hold utensils the right way, or I say right's not the right word, not being able to hold utensils in a functional way that helps them eat, or not being able to hold utensils because the feel of the metal or the plastic or whatever the feel of the utensil is hard too. So the difficult thing when it comes to sensory is really looking at what part of the sensory is going on. Things can really overlap and starting to pull things out. So other things we look for a lot, again, that rocking at the table, throwing, hitting, things like that, that can be related to our proprioceptive sense, our sense of body awareness. When kids feel like they have a bellyache, but you think that they're hungry, they might not be picking up their interoceptive sense. So being able to know what's going on inside their body. So there is an array of things really sensory wise that can kind of be hidden, but causing challenges for parents and kids at the table.
Oh, this is so good. This is why I love OTs, because the more I dig into my children's behaviors, the more I realize a lot of it is sensory related, and it comes off as maybe defiance or stubbornness, or, well, it's often combined with strong will with my children. And it's just so misinterpreted by me, where when I stop and realize, okay, what's really going on? Why is this behavior here in the first place? Suddenly it makes sense. Like, well, of course they're behaving like that. They don't have any skill set to not be eating with their fingers right now. They need help in order to learn how to use that fork in a way that works for them and with their particular skill set. So,
Yeah. And it's challenging for kids with sensory challenges because they often feel a need to really control their environment, to control what's going on, as opposed to the parent leading what's going on, because the world feels so unpredictable and so out of control for them. So, whatever control they can get, whether it's that they're not going to eat this food, that they want to do it this way, that they want to swivel, that they want to do this, whatever control they can get to regulate their body and help things feel more predictable, they usually will. But it's where to parents it comes off as stubborn and strong-willed and really challenging behaviors, where they're trying on the other way to just control their environment as much as possible.
when we look through it with that lens, suddenly it makes so much sense, right? Oh, that's good. So, for parents who feel like they are having mealtime battles, or maybe their child really adamantly avoids certain foods. I know you have an entire membership on, your Food Explorers membership. So I know you can't give all of the answers in, the next 2 minutes, but just what small tip would you have for them for this?
So my biggest tip usually to parents, what I would say, I'm going to kind of say two. My biggest tip to parents is to make it fun for kids, to make them want to be there, to make it pleasurable. That is like, as an OT, what I do when somebody works with me, my very first thing that I'm doing is trying to show kids that food can be pleasurable, food can be enjoyable, whether it's with food games, whether it's by trying out new recipes with the food they already like and creating a little bit of variety. But I said I was going to give two because I know that saying make it fun is actually very challenging for parents. I know that that is like a much easier said than done thing. And anybody here listening is probably like, Sam, I am exhausted. I do not have time
Especially
to
if it's not the way
focus.
that we were raised. We just
Yes.
don't have those ideas. Yeah.
Right. We were not raised in that generation. That is not what we are expecting at the table. Now, our generation's a little different here. We're moving in that direction. So that would be, if I could say, like, my one thing that I think really makes a big difference at the table. I think bringing the fun into it, you just see kids, they totally change their outlook when we do a food play activity versus, if I say to a kid, let's try and balance a carrot on our lips, or let's try and balance it on our tongue, and I stick out my tongue and do it. They just tasted the carrot. They didn't even notice they tasted the carrot, and they're having a great time doing it. But I know that that's really challenging to do for a parent, especially we're trying to think about nice meal times and behavior out in public and things like that. So for a parent who's really struggling with that, fighting with those mealtime battles, with the strong wills, my biggest thing would be to take a step back and even just like sit down with a piece of paper, write down all the things that you're noticing, and just really consider, is this really them just being difficult? Or could there be something else going on that you might want to look into, that you might want to go to an OT, that you might want to talk to a friend, you might want to look at Emily's parenting tips for how to talk and how to relate to them a little bit better. But is it really just them being difficult, or are they struggling? And then where do you go from there? So where's your next best step?
That is such good advice. And then, of course, I would say follow Sam on social media because you have so many just really realistic reels to start opening up our minds to different ways of approaching meal times. So where can people
Totally.
find you on social media or elsewhere?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I'm at Dr. Sam Goldman on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest. But yes, I do love to share all sorts of fun reels. I really do love to educate. My website right now is www.theot4me.com. And over there, I do have courses all about the sensory system, understanding this. Like Emily said, I have a Food Explorers membership to help you really combat these behaviors at the table, these challenges that you're having at the table, and make eating a pleasurable and fun experience for you and them, because we want eating to be fun. We want the table to be fun. And I want to bring that back for families, is enjoyable meal times.
This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.